Remember, who threw the last punch over there?
Healthy good.
Oh, man.
You'll have to all pray for me. I'm going to have my 5-month-old granddaughter all by myself till Saturday morning. Her mother claims she sleeps all night.
How are you? Everything.
If I stay up all night, we'll sleep
I know
together.
You will.
I mean, because I'm all about, being around people and all, and that's like, no, that is enough. Don't even.
That's what's great.
Oh, okay.
Everybody.
Locations.
How about the couple?
I think council will settle that.
Where are they moving to?
Fish house.
Oh, good. I noticed where the cafeteria place opened up.
Frankie's.
Frankie's. Yes, I didn't know that. I heard it advertised. I thought, where? You said in Dixie Cafe's old building? Is that where it is? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The cafeteria. Frankie's. I started to say Furs, but it's Frankie's.
Okay, she is.
She's going west side of town.
What about,
I know she lives out of town, so one I know. David's right there. Good, how are you? I met Mr. McCray that works at Common Corp today. He's so nice.
College day was really
I said, no, I don't know.
We're on the council together.
I'm sorry.
Actually, I went to school with Cecilia McCray, which is his relative,
Shower and
cousin, I think he said maybe. Anyway, we were talking about his daughter, Lori.
Oh, Lord, yeah.
And I said, well, I met her, the other day. So, hey, Jay, good, how are you? Anyway, talk about, we hope she does really well.
I do too.
There's no doubt in my mind, I think she'll do really well.
I do too.
All these emails.
Get ready for the wedding.
Oh, good. Sure looks pretty. Your yard looks beautiful. I saw Jenny mowing it one day and we waved at her. It's like, where's Tracy? Surely Tracy didn't injure himself again. We need around all that mess. You sound like Brian. That's what they said. I think we need to push it towards the street. And I said, well, they don't do it for safety reasons. They like a little bit further off.
Yeah.
It makes your yard look pretty though,
We had to go to the shower.
Oh.
That's where Josh is from.
Oh, yeah.
Until the new phase opens up and it'll be.
The Ashley County Museum.
It's going to, I think Hal's wanting to close on those lots in October. I mean, it's ready in 2 weeks, he said. So it's coming down.
It was fun. They were very sweet.
Have y'all got a homeowners association started yet?
You get one.
Y'all need to really go in and get that rolling. Well, I think half, I don't know how many lots are in the new phase.
Dress is ready.
More than 1 and 2. I think it's got to be at least 50% of them,
No,
or
it's just gone back.
70 or 80. I mean, there's a quota. I don't remember what it is.
Her doctor.
But all,
So she's a little stressed right now. She has the class.
Delegated.
Every Friday.
you really, I mean, Carrie or Mark definitely, Carrie'd be great
And
to
then zip home.
get it going and try to get, because they're retired now, and it'd be easier for them to probably try to round up everybody, at least for a meeting. And
I don't know how else we work this out.
oh, I knew Debbie told me she really wanted to this year. Well, I retired. And I miss everybody at school, though. Yeah, I'm busy, but still, I do miss everybody.
So you
But
mind,
I'm so glad she's gonna
so you
love
mind
it.
like you're in deep
How
thought?
many years is she?
I got a lot of them.
I know, a lot on your plate, ain't it? You'll be fine, man.
I'll be good. I'll be good.
Oh, she's got a lot. I only had 22, not that many.
Andy, come on.
Well, just like we have 6 here, which one is so we'd be able to.
Good evening, everyone. We proceed each council meeting with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would, if you'd like to, please feel free to join us.
It's all right.
Would you bow? Father in heaven, we thank you for your grace and your goodness and your mercy. We thank you for this great nation in this great city that you've allowed us to be a part of. We pray for our decisions tonight, that they would honor you and be the right decisions. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hawkins?
I am here.
Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Miss Mel?
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Here.
Miss Smith?
Here.
And Mr. Jones?
Here.
Okay, you should have received copies of the August 13, 2019 City Council minutes. Any corrections, changes, or comments?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0. Next up, we have our monthly financial report ending Monday, July 31st, 2019. Mr. Winningham.
Good evening, everybody. Starting in the general fund there in the revenue section, you can see we've starting to recognize our insurance turnback from LOPFI. We've been notified what that number is going to be this year. It's just over the 1.3 million budget. It's about it's $1,368,000 is what you'll see there. After we recognize all that, we'll do that monthly, gradually, as we utilize that for the city's portion of LOPFI contributions. Sales tax was another good month. It was up about 6.25%. So year to date, we're at a positive, a little over 2.5. And bottom line, still not looking that great, but I did want to point out the expenditures related to remodeling City Hall is in that administration expenditures number. So far, we've spent about $359,000. So of the 744 net expense for the year, we've got 359 on the books that we would not have in a normal year. So just wanted to make council aware of that, and also anybody else out there keeping up with us. And that's all I've got, really, unless council has any questions or comments.
I make a motion to approve the monthly financials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the monthly financials ending July 31st, 2019. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Winningham.
You talk. I know who you're talking.
Mr. Hawkins, when we get into your portion, items 4 and 5 have been paid, so we'll be taking those off. First up tonight, we have a public hearing regarding the issuance of bonds for sale of wastewater revenue improvement bonds for Conway Corporation. If you would like to speak for or against this issuance, would you please state your name for the record and your address? Mr. Carroll.
Mayor, Council, Brett Carroll. My address is 14 Summerfield Drive, Conway, Arkansas. And I'm here to speak in favor of the sale of debt or the issuance of debt for this project. And just to give you a little background, we began to talk to our investment bankers about some refinancing of some debt to save some money. In fact, that particular refinancing, the net present value savings of that project, of that transaction, is $1.9 million. And while we were talking to them about refinancing, we were talking about some projects and what projects have you got that you're working on. And one of those projects is, we have two wastewater treatment facilities. The newest one, our Tupelo Bio wastewater treatment plant. But we also have one that's probably, it's past 30 years old. It's the Tucker Creek wastewater treatment facility. It's an aerated facultative lagoon. And we have an opportunity, when we looked at the economics of continuing to spend about $600,000 a year to maintain and operate this plant, or convert it to an equalization basin, which is basically holding ponds, which will involve some upfront capital cost, but will do away with the maintenance cost. And so the economics of that project will save our ratepayers, a good bit of money over the life of the project. So anyway, as we were talking about this refinancing, the timing on rates for bond issues is so good right now. So it's a really good opportunity, I think, to go ahead and and borrow that money to do this project. And so I think it'll be a good project for Conway Corp. It'll be a good project for the ratepayers of Conway. So anyway, I speak in favor of issuing that debt.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to speak for or against? Okay, if no one would like to speak for or against, we'll close the public hearing. Next up, we have an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of wastewater revenue improvement bonds for Conway Corporation.
I'll make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make
For adoption of the ordinance
an emergency.
and emergency, is emergency?
Second.
And emergency clause.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
What number is that, Mike? I'm sorry.
That would be 01984.
Those both pass 6-0. Thanks, Brett. Next, we have an ordinance, let me just make sure that. Yes. Next, we have an ordinance amending ordinance number 01880 governing of small wireless communications facilities for the city of Conway. I have you down as speaking, Mr. Carroll. Is that you or is?
Yeah.
I think Mr. Carter.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you guys may recall, we passed a city ordinance related to small cell deployment. There were some changes in state law. So I'm going to introduce Jason Carter. You guys may know him. He is the former North Little Rock city attorney, the former interim general manager for the electric department in North Little Rock Utilities, and he just moved his private practice to Conway. Today was his first day in the office. So he is our Arkansas Municipal Power Association general counsel, and so he's worked a lot on this particular ordinance, and so I'll let him tell you about the changes and why we need to do this.
Glad to have you in Conway and welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Glad to be here, Mayor, glad to be before the Conway City Council as well. As Mr. Carroll just said, we were here last year, we adopted a small cell ordinance. Some things changed since then. The FCC passed some orders. We went through the state legislature, adopted Act 999, which heavily regulates small cells, and we learned along the way. And we've developed amendments to the small cell ordinance. I won't tell you that this is the last time that you'll look at it. There are more things that need to be amended, and it's developing technology, and we're learning along the way. But we think that this is a good set of regulations, for us to transition to. There's still work yet to be done because there are special protections for overlay districts. Those overlay districts need to be identified. Maps need to be made. There are things that we need to amend in along the way. But if it's possible, we would like to see this ordinance approved tonight, if that would be acceptable to the council. The reason being is that there is a rule under Act 999 that has to do with severability with ordinances that are passed prior to September 1st. If there turned out to be an issue within an ordinance, that issue could be severed from the remainder of the ordinance, and the ordinance would be able to stand. For ordinances adopted after September 1st, that severability doesn't exist. So if there's a flaw within the ordinance, it would cause the entire ordinance to be overturned. Now, the good thing about City of Conway is you already have an ordinance in place, and that's good. So you've kind of got a safety net built in for you. We do think that these rules are better. They're more tailored to the community and will serve the community better. And with that, I will answer any questions you might have.
I'll go ahead and ask. Just kind of run this, because obviously this is pretty complex, and I know the council knows, but just for the viewing public, kind of explain exactly what this is regulating, and maybe kind of go over a little bit of the history, because I like to feel like we were ahead of the curve. We did so much work on the front end to adopt 18-80, and kind of give an explanation of the history of that.
Sure. So, the history behind it, and Chuck, you're absolutely correct. We were ahead of the curve. We kind of saw the technology coming with the proposed race to 5G that's happening right now. This is a race between the United States and China, essentially, about trying to get 5G deployed. The proposal today reflects kind of, and I should say from the FCC and from the state, reflects the national intent that these small cell facilities will facilitate the race to at least a wireless 5G and a more interconnected society. Of course, we want the United States to win that race, not only because we like to win, right, but also because there are moral and ethical implications of this new interconnected society that nobody's really dealt with yet. And we want to be leading that conversation. We would prefer that America lead that conversation rather than a communist country. So that's where we think that it's important. The infrastructure that's being built out right now is being built out in preparation for 5G. 5G does not exist right now. Even if you've got one of those a little icon on your cell phone that says 5G, you'll notice it says 5GE. Right, that's 5G evolution, right? It's moving towards 5G, but it's not 5G. So, but the infrastructure is being planned and put in place so that when the 5G standards are made and the technology exists, it'll be quick to deploy. So all of that's interesting. It's exciting for our communities, but at the same time, we have to be concerned about what are these things going to look like? How does this fit with the aesthetics of our communities? You know, is it going to be disruptive to our neighborhoods? From Conway Corporation's standpoint too, they've got to think about their infrastructure and how this affects their ability to deliver reliable and affordable power. And we don't want just stuff hung all over the poles, and not just from what it looks like, but how it will affect the operation of the system. So it's very important. The ordinance that you have in front of you is, I think, an aggressive ordinance. You know, that we're seeking to, you know, ensure that we can protect our aesthetic interests of the community and protect the infrastructure as well. And it's got a lot of lessons that we've learned along the way while doing it. As I said, I don't think it's a final step. I think it's the next step, but I think it's an important one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out this is kind of evolving. We need to have an ordinance that we can amend as the rules change, as we learn more. And this covers everything from access to right-of-ways, placement on poles, safety of our Conway Corporation employees, and you know, where on the poles these are placed, how often they're placed, and the spacing. And it covers quite a bit of things. And I appreciate everything that you've done, because it's been a lot of work.
Yeah, I think you're all being quite modest. I know Chuck is, and Conway Corporation, and they really have been on the front end of this and been very aggressive with it. So I appreciate all the work y'all have all done on this.
I should mention as well, Mayor, all the work that was done early has not just been beneficial to this community, it's been beneficial to a lot of other communities who've been able to look at this and learn and, you know, plagiarize like good cities do, right? But you know, that's the way we do business, and that's part of it, right? We try to lean on each other as cities, and there's a lot of cities leaning on you right now in the work that you've done. So you should be applauded for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any questions?
I make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption and the emergency clause.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with emergency clause. Any other discussion?
Just one quick question. I just want to make sure that James Walden is happy with the way things are going. Okay. It's got a lot of things in there with overlay districts. We had some discussions, and I just want to make sure I got the thumbs up from him.
Okay. Mr. Garrett.
Be ordinance number 01985. Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
The emergency clause, Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Those both passed 6-0. Before we move any further, Mr. Hawkins, I'd like to make sure I've got this right. Felicia is in New York, and she sent me a text. Jake Tatum and members of Troop 534 from Boy Scouts, y'all here at your first council meeting, stand up so we can look at you and wave.
Really excited.
Welcome. Well, we're glad you're here. This is one of your badges? Which one would this be? Communications. Good deal. Good night to be here.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Glad you're here, guys. Next up, we have the Community Development, and Mr. Hawkins, we'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on this portion of the agenda is a resolution setting a public hearing to discuss the closing of a utility easement in Lot 4 and 7, Block 3 of the Robbinswood addition. We have a resolution to read for this item. It's Resolution R 1934.
I'll make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution to set a public hearing for the next council meeting on September 10th. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance approving the private club permit location for Walk-On Sports Bistro of Conway for property located at 955 South Amity Road. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance O 1986.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance.
We have council and representative from Walk-Ons.
Mayor, members of the city council, Councilor Clausen, Brother Hawkins. I want to say first, North Little Rock's loss is certainly Conway's gain. Jason Carter's a good man. He worked with my brother in the city as a city attorney over there, and he served our country with honor. He served our North Little Rock with honor. I'm sure he will continue that here. I wish he'd stuck around here. Somebody must have chased him out. I'm not here to talk on behalf, though, however, of walk-ons. I think Jeremy Gaspar, the manager, will do a better job than I. I know I'm looking forward to trying to voodoo shrimp, fried alligator, and boom boom shrimp. So with that, I'd introduce Mr. Gaspar.
How are y'all?
Good, Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy Gaspar. I'll be the operating partner of the Walk-On Sports Bistro here in Conway. I could definitely say that we are really excited about having our first location here in Arkansas in Conway, and we chose this because of a great growing community, and it's a perfect fit for our game day favorites with a gourmet take on it, but with the community, with the sports mentality, and a great for offering great opportunities for, we'll probably hire 200 people with development from it and a fast-growing concept that is really a food-first mentality to, bring friends and family, date night, but fresh from scratch ingredients of Louisiana-inspired Cajun cuisine. So we're really excited. Any questions that y'all have about
When will Drew Brees be here?
Well, if it was up to me, you don't have to be a Saints fan. You could just be a good guy fan. And, Drew Brees being part of our concept definitely, just tells about our culture and what we do. But he is very involved. We will probably be the 32nd location, and we have 150 locations already bought and paid for. So 5-year plan is 500 restaurants. So
Wow.
Conway is definitely going to be spearheading what we plan on having 5 in Arkansas within 2 years.
Well, my Cajun brother-in-law's impressed.
Ça c'est bon. I guarantee.
He said you're going to like it.
We'll pass a good time.
Any other questions? Mr. Garrett.
Okay, Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Conway.
Thank you, guys.
Get
Thank
get your A&P permit.
Thank you, Brother Morley.
Mr. Hawkins.
He's getting that plug in there.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance approving the private club permit location for Verona Entertainment of Conway for property located at 190 Skyline Drive. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance O 1987.
Make a motion, we waive 3 readings.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to waive the three readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Anyone like to speak? All right. If not, Mr. Garrett.
See ordinance 01987. Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. And these next two items, Mr. Hawkins, are ones that have been pulled.
Items 4 and 5 have been taken care of, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Like to hear that. Like to hear that. So that moves us on to item 6, and this will be an ordinance amending the Title 11 of the Conway Municipal Code as related to flex duct limitations for the Permits and Inspection Department. And guys, tell me about flex duct limitations, and I had to slow down to say that one, because I'd have messed that up in my heartbeat.
Permits and inspection, and this is Cecil Corning. He's my HVAC inspector and specialist, and I'm gonna let him answer all the questions on it. He's the man you're gonna talk to on that, so I just want to introduce to him and this is him.
Thank you, Kenny.
Very good.
Thank you.
What I am looking to, closer,
No, the microphone, just pull the microphone there, Cecil, I'm sorry.
Cecil Corning, Mechanical Inspector, City of Conway. I'm going to try to speak up, but I don't want to sound like I'm shouting. What I've encountered with our, and what we're wanting to eliminate is flex duct in residential. Now, it's essential that we keep it in commercial because of recessed ceilings and removable grills. We have to keep it because it's a necessity there. But in residential, there are very, very few contractors that still use it. And the ones that do are abusing it. They're going beyond the limitations that the code allows as far as length. Also, they're not supporting it correctly. Flex duct over the years will deteriorate. It will collapse. If it's in a older home, mice can get in it. Metal pipe, you do not have that issue. Air will travel through metal pipe much easier than it's going to travel through flex. Flex, if it's not stretched tight, even though it may say 6-inch, you're not going to get the volume of air through that duct that you would a 6-inch round pipe. That's hard pipe. So my suggestion is to eliminate the flex duct in residential. Now, we do have issues in commercial also, but that ordinance is already in place where flex is only used on branch lines. Generally, in your large commercial, you will have engineers that will give specs as far as the dimensions and lengths, vertical, horizontal, that can be allowed for your flex duct. And that, we're pretty well covered there by the engineer specs in a commercial application. And we're not going to interfere with that at all. It's because you do not have any type of specs in residential that tell them how long, what they can do, how long they can do. Most of your heating and air guys do not want to use flex to begin with. There's just a small group that is somewhat abusing the allowance that the 2010 mechanical code gives them, which is 14 feet. In a house setting, you don't have that much distance up in the attic. And when they stretch that much duct, especially anymore, you have to have raised attic space because of the energy code making you have 12 inches of insulation. You have to keep your air conditioning up above that insulation because you don't want that in your pan, meaning your return is going to have to be higher. What they're putting it in is primarily the return. Stretching that duct long distances across your joists, it sags. If they could, if you're in the gable part of your, or in the peak part of your house, there's nothing to support it from as far as strap. They could, if they would, support it from the bottom, but they don't. The restrictions on flex duct is a lot stronger on flex than it is hard pipe as far as support because it collapses. You have to support it every 5 feet. And that's what I'm running into. And I continually have had this problem since I've been the inspector for the last almost 6 years. Flex duct is not supported correctly. Occasionally you will find where they don't put the correct turns. Anytime you change directions, with flex, you're supposed to have a mechanical elbow to help you make that turn, which is usually on the top of a removable grill. Sometimes that's not there. The code actually states anytime you have a turn, a mechanical fitting is the way the code reads. In our case, we think of that as the elbow. If there's anything that I can answer,
Good job explaining.
You wrap that up.
Oh,
Good job.
okay.
Good job. And it's to help the homeowners, to get a better product, That's the reason why we're doing it beyond.
Is there a big cost difference?
Probably not because of the return. You don't have a lot of duck on return. Now, true, your return is usually the largest duck. It has to be as large or larger than your main trunk. So yes, but if you're not traveling a long distance, then no. The cost will increase some because of the cost of insulation. The flex is already insulated. Where the metal hard pipe, you'll have to insulate it as you put it in. So there is additional cost.
And you
So you say
said
most of them are using
the majority of the builders in Conway are already using,
Nearly everyone uses a hard pipe.
okay.
There's probably one or two that.
And there's some that would not put flex in anything. Supply or return.
Thank you.
I make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption in the emergency clause.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion?
Is there anybody else in the audience that wants to?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Mel. Yeah, but anyone else, is there any contractors that'd like to speak to this? Mr. Garrett?
Be O 1988. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Ms. Mel? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Those both passed 6-0. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution authorizing the Office of the City Attorney to seek condemnation for property located at 1604 Tyler Street for the Tyler Street Sidewalk Improvement Project. And, Council, would you like to take this? Would you like to talk about it?
I can. So there's been ongoing negotiations with property owners along the Tyler Street Improvement Project. This is purchasing right-of-way to put in sidewalks. We were able to reach an agreement with the vast majority of homeowners along Tyler Street, except for these 2, which we basically just can't make contact with. I even personally went out to both residents to try to see if I could find anybody, but it doesn't look like anyone lives there anymore. So anyway, these are the last 2 holdouts, and I think it's 1604 and 2111 were the ones that are before you.
Yeah. Okay.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion?
Resolution is R 1935.
Not Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6-0. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution authorizing the Office of the City Attorney to seek condemnation for, well, did we do that one?
Do them separate.
Well, it's a different
Okay,
location.
2111.
We talked about it.
Tyler, and that's, so it's the same situation Chuck just talked about, it's just the different
Same
location.
project, and this is just one step in the process of condemnation. Once we get the resolution passed, there'll be an application to the circuit court, and then from there, we'll get a right of entry, and then deposit the funds from our appraisals, or from our appraisals into the court for the homeowners to pick up.
I
And
make a
this is
motion.
Resolution R 1936.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution accepting the bid for reflective pane and thermoplastic pavement markings. Hey, I'm just reading.
That's what it says.
That's-
It says.
I'm just reading. What is reflective pane?
Paint on mine.
What is that?
That's the paint that starts here and it goes all the way down to here.
I can tell you exactly what that is.
What is that? Hey, I thought it was something that I just didn't know anything about. Oh, well. I'd say that'd be paint, maybe? That's correct. Yeah, thank you very much. Get it right next
And
time.
I'll go into a little bit further detail on this. Finley has done a good job in trying to get our wards striped and our new resurfacing. And we've noticed that our paint is not lasting very long in some of these areas, especially our heavily traveled areas. So the cost of the thermoplastic is higher per foot, but it lasts, I think Finley told me, between 8 to 10 years. Is that correct, Finley? So it's going to cost us a little bit more up front, but it's going to last a lot longer. So anyway, from there, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Finley. Mr. Vinson? Mr. Finley, Mr. Vinson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. You have before you a resolution to accept the bid for reflective paint and thermoplastic pavement markings, and we're asking you to accept the bid from Contractor Specialty in the amount of $175,259.50.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept this pricing on our thermal pane. Any further discussion?
That's why Felicia couldn't get this stuff to send the other night.
Do what?
That's why she couldn't get this sent out the other day.
This is an ordinance, isn't it?
No resolution.
No resolution. All right.
It's resolution.
I'm sorry, we have a motion and a second to accept this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0, and that was 37.
Thank you.
Thank you, Finley.
Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve a conditional use permit request from Sarah Huggins, Victor Investment Properties, to allow church or religious activities in an I-3 zoning district for property located at 750 9th Avenue. And I was looking to see if this was reviewed or not. Hi. Hey, James. What do you got?
So this property is over there by Central Landing on the east side in the industrial park. The applicant brought this in. They've got a church that would like to lease it. They're approaching this from the perspective of a somewhat temporary use, but temporary uses often turn into long-term uses, so that they have to bear that in mind. When this was heard at the Planning Commission, the applicant stated it would be about a 50-member religious congregation that meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well as Sundays. Would not have a child care or preschool program. It was voted 8-0 by the Planning Commission with the following conditions, those conditions being that the parking would be upgraded to meet current standards. It's got a gravel lot on site, and so transition it to a paved parking lot, meet all the required landscaping. Any additions, expansions, or changes to the use would require reapproval of the conditional use permit. And additionally, that the conditional use permit would be limited to the term of the current occupancy. So if it changed occupants, then it would be null and void. At the meeting, there was one individual that spoke pertaining to the application, not necessarily out of opposition, but out of a question and concern related to the fact that sometimes religious uses within the context of an industrial park can limit some of the types of industry that might come into that area. And so there was some concern regarding that, not necessarily opposition.
I make a motion, we grant this conditional use permit.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve this conditional use permit. Any further discussion?
Just to follow up on what you said, that's a good point,
Yeah.
because I remember years ago, Tab brought this up, if you start to fill up your industrial zones with non-industrial stuff, then you need more industrial zones, and those are harder sometimes to get approved, than you think it is. So you do have to be careful going down this road.
Have we,
I think
have we heard from the developer over there?
Have we heard from a developer? No. I know that they've got some properties, Mr. Rhymes, a couple of properties sold and some interest in that area. Do they not?
I'm not sure what you're talking
Are
about.
you talking about
Never mind.
Schaefer?
Scratch that.
Okay.
Didn't we approve some religious activity in that area before, in one of Tilt's buildings?
Seemed
think
like
we did.
I remember that too, yeah.
That was one of those ones that fronted the
interstate.
Freeway.
Yeah, on the access road, yeah.
I don't know if they're still there or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's the discussion we talked about before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
You know.
Well, this one is supposed to be temporary.
Correct.
I mean, it could be.
Yeah, I always caution everyone that when something is temporary, fully expect for that to be permanent. That's just a planning idea or theme that often happens. But the applicant has stated that they're essentially have purchased this property as an investment property that they're holding on to as Central Landing develops, that they know that that area will transition, that they're expecting that the land use for that property to transition as well over time. So that's kind of the approach that the applicant has taken with it.
That was my bad, Mr. Grimes. I was too far east. Any other questions? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins?
And finally, Mr. Mayor, the consideration to approve a conditional use permit request from Alan Shaver, Shaver Properties, to allow a density up to 12 dwelling units per acre for R2A, that's two-family residential district, for property located at 553 Factory Street. And this was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their August 19th meeting of this year. And at that time, the vote was 8-0 that the request be forwarded to City Council with a recommendation for approval with some conditions. All access to all 3 units shall be provided from the 3rd Street frontage. All units shall front on Factory Street with principal entrances that face the street. If proposed, garages shall be on the rear or side loaded, and all parking shall be located to the rear of the property. And with those conditions, I move that we grant this conditional use permit.
Second.
Sorry, I couldn't.
We've got a motion and second, and James would like to probably say something else.
Oh, no, I'm just standing here in case you want me to say something. No.
We have a motion and a second to approve this conditional permit. Any further discussion?
Let me ask a couple of questions. James, currently, under the current zoning, what could be built here?
Under the current zoning, the property falls under the Old Conway Overlay District, and it additionally falls under the R2A zoning. So based on its current square footage, without a conditional use permit, it could be developed as a duplex, and that duplex would be subject to the Old Conway design overlay.
Okay. So basically, they're wanting to go from 2 living units to 3 living units?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, the only heartburn I have, I mean, there's worse things I guess could go here, but you know, what you've seen in this neighborhood a lot, you know, R2A, if I remember, this was way before many of us, maybe not you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah, no.
But R2A was created, you know, to make sure you don't cram too much stuff into one little lot. I mean, there was a reason for it. And, you know, over the years, we've kind of chipped away at it, you know, one rezoning at a time. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of ever having done that.
It's really dense.
You know, I mean, it's barely big enough for 2 units, let alone 3. So that's where I have some concern. I mean, you know, I grew up in this neighborhood. I'm not going to let that affect my decision necessarily, but I mean, I've seen this neighborhood change from what used to be somebody's backyard. Now it's got 2 houses in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just not sure that's what we intended that to do all those years ago. So I don't know. Like I say, I mean, it's a gravel lot now. I drove by it the other day. I don't remember what was there. I'm sure anything there is better than what was there. But again, you know, how much is too much?
Yeah.
That was our thinking over here. It's
Yeah,
kind of dense.
that's a lot of homes in 1 acre.
I guess I think about how we've moved to more density in a thoughtful way. I mean, look at the Hendricks Village. Look
definitely,
at
yeah.
some of the other, you know, I'm thinking about the Fiddler, the Anderson Fiddler neighborhood. You know, there's a lot of empty lots being built on, and they're a lot closer, and people like that. And now these are duplexes, which is a little different, but people grow up in duplexes too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Okay, let me see a show of hands.
All in
For all in
favor?
favor, say aye. And all opposed. Okay. That would be a 2-4 vote, so that does not pass.
It is pretty dense, but.
So what now?
Said the women against the boys.
Oh, it's going that way, okay, all right.
Oh, see?
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir.
Before
Thank
we
you.
move to the public safety portion of this, I'd like to ask the council to waive,
Suspend the rules.
suspend, yes, thank you, Mary.
So moved.
Suspend the rules so that we can look at a permit for Blackwoods Grill to move their liquor license to a new location.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
We have a motion and second to suspend the rules. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. Okay, Blackwood Grill, they've been in business in downtown Conway quite some time. They're moving to a new location. I think it's the Fish House, is that correct? That's correct. On Highway 64. And they need to go ahead and transfer their license now. Otherwise, this is going to set them back, and they're moving by about a month. And so I appreciate y'all suspending the rules. Would you like to say anything?
I move for adoption of the ordinance.
Yeah.
We need to waive the readings.
I'll waive the reasons of the ordinance then.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Now I'll move for the adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you. James Blackwood. I'm a downtown merchant, 1992. And my business is expanding, and I'm looking to move. Thank the council for suspending the rules and allowing me for the application to change of location, which would also mean the moving of a private club, Class A license. And if you have any questions.
No.
You have great food, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, my wife and I love it.
Thank you. Well, I don't think I'll be hiring 200 people, but I do plan on doubling the size that I
Just keep the
have.
ones you got is good.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions, council?
That's at the corner of Robbins, that Fish House? Am I
Yes,
right?
sir.
Rider.
Park Rider and Robbins?
Yes, sir. It's a nice property. I think
Yes,
with
it
the building
is.
over there, with the airport moving, the property left of 365 Fitness, when all this comes in, I think in 2 years, that'll be a nice place, and I think I can add to it.
Good.
Mr. Garrett?
It's the ordinance 01989. Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the public safety part of our meeting. We have consideration to dispose or remove items from inventory of vehicles with the Conway Police Department. Chief Spradlin.
Good evening. We got 3 vehicles we'd like to take off our inventory. The 2 Hondas that you see on the list there are drug seized vehicles and have no use for them anymore, so we'd like to sell those at publicsurplus.com.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this request for disposal of inventory. Any further discussion? Let me ask the council this. There is a group here in Conway that takes old vehicles that are no longer useful for cities, the police department. It's a nonprofit organization. Randall Boland's mother is real big into it. And would y'all have any problem with us donating these 3 cars to them?
I don't.
If the chief doesn't.
You okay with that, Chief?
We will get very little out of the sale of those vehicles, so I would not be opposed.
Well,
to
they
that.
take them and fix them up and get them running and donate to some folks that need them.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sounds
Put them in
good.
people's hands that need them.
All right. Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
6-0. I'll call Miss Geneva tonight. That'll make her happy. Next, we have consideration to dispose or remove from inventory an air sampler and inventory logs for the Conway Police Department. Chief Spradlin.
And we've got an air sampler and 2 SCBA's rig outs that we had back in the day when we were taking down meth labs. So basically, this is what our narcotics investigators use to dismantle a meth lab safely without breathing in the toxic fumes. So these are outdated, no longer of use. We'd like to take them off inventory and destroy
So
those.
moved.
I
Second.
thought you were going to say that we didn't have any more meth
I
problems.
didn't say that. I said, we don't have the meth labs like we used to.
We have a motion and a second to approve the disposal of this inventory for Conway PD. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
That's a 6-0. Next up is an ordinance appropriating reimbursement funds from various entities for the Conway Police Department. Chief.
Just a general accounting ordinance that you've seen before, nothing to add to that.
Move to waive the readings.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to waive the three readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Make a motion for adoption.
That's 6-0. We have a motion to
Second.
adopt this ordinance and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The O-1990. Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Mel? Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Chief Spradlin, an ordinance appropriating asset forfeiture funds to the Conway Police Department for various purchases and for other purposes.
Yeah, we're asking for $1,900 out of our asset forfeiture fund. One of our canine officers has stepped down from his role after serving 7 years in that capacity. We asked for a 3-year commitment when they go to a special unit like that. So he's more than fulfilled that. It was an unexpected expense, and so we did not budget for it in the 2019 budget. So we would ask to use asset forfeiture money to send the new canine handler through the basic canine handler's course.
Make a motion, we waive the three readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the three readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
The O-1991. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Ordinance accepting bids and appropriating asset, I'm gonna get in trouble with that, asset forfeiture funds for the police and fire training facility in the city.
This is Phase 2 of a three-phase building project with the Police and Fire Training Center. We put out bids for the interior construction and electrical installation for this project, and we're asking that we accept Syntec Services for the lowest electrical bid. We actually had one bid that was $904 lower, but they did not submit a correct bid by not submitting the correct form or their bid bond, including in that. So we're asking to go with Syntec Services for the electrical. And then for the lowest bid on construction, we're asking to go with Eric Moick's Construction for $30,000, or $30,475. This combined with the fire department money, we're asking for $72,000 out of asset forfeiture money to complete this phase of the project.
I'll make a motion, we waive the three readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the three readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption and the emergency clause.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion?
Eric sharpened his pencil pretty good, didn't he?
He beat them bad.
About a half price kicking, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah.
He's
further
also the
discussion?
one that put the building up, built the building. So he's been strong in this project.
Good,
Good.
good.
Mr. Garrett.
The O-1992. Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Those both passed 6-0. I noticed the city of Conway was 13th in the state for the safest city, so I appreciate the job that you and your personnel do, Chief, keeping us all safe. Y'all,
All right, thank you.
y'all standing tall. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That's all we have tonight. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move.
So we are adjourned. Anybody, I'm going over to the